Do you own property with someone? Do you know what type of ownership you have? Are you a joint tenant or a tenant in common? Stay tuned to learn the difference between the two. Hi, I'm Kimberly Ivory Graves, your help, Holistic Elite Legacy Planner, aka Help Me Kimberly. I am also the author of Leaving Peace in Order, a step-by-step guide to getting your affairs in order. If you're interested in getting a copy of my book, go to my website, helpmekimberly.com. And while you're there, you can also get the accompanying workbook, either in the mini size or in the full size. The worksheets also come on a flash drive, so when ordering the set, make sure you select which one you want. This is the Living Peace and Order show, where we share tips to a life of love and peace through Jesus Christ and steps to getting your affairs in order. Do me a favor. I'm going to give you your assignment now. Why don't you hit like and also share and tag someone and let them know that you're watching the Live in Peace and Order show. And also add some comments or questions. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and hit that notification button. And you too can also put your comments and questions below. Thank you in advance for completing your assignment. Well, our scripture for the week is found in Psalms 29 and 11, and it reads, "The Lord will give strength unto his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace." I share this scripture with you, and the scripture of the week every week is because the Living Peace and Order show is divided into two segments. The first segment is the peace aspect, and that's where we share 52 weeks of peace. We share a different scripture each week pertaining to peace. And this is aired every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time on Clubhouse. So I encourage you to join us. And then the second aspect of the show is the order aspect. And that's where we share tips to getting your affairs in order. And that is aired every Tuesday and Thursday on YouTube and Facebook at 7 p.m. Please make sure that you follow us on all of these platforms. Thank you very much. Well, our topic today is, are you a joint tenant or a tenant in common? Now, when you own real property with someone else, there are, in most states, two different types of ownership. And actually, there are more than two, but the two that I want to point out tonight are joint tenancy and tenancy in common. And of course, if you are the sole owner, then there's sole ownership. If you're married and you and your spouse own a home together, that's called tenancy by entirety. And then also the last one that we'll probably discuss is trust ownership, when you literally take your property and put it in a trust. But before I tell you the difference between the two, let me share a personal story with you. My mom and I bought a duplex several years ago, and I owned one side and she owned the other, and we both lived in our sides. But my mom also lived with her brother, who was co-owner with her, so he actually was on the deed as well as my mom, and then I was on my deed separately. So about 8 years after we purchased our home, I got married. Then my uncle decided that he wanted to get married as well. And at the time, he was working as a bagger at our local grocery store. And he met this older woman and ended up moving out and decided to marry her. Well, after, they were married, she began to search around, and she found out that he was co-owner of the home that, my mom and my uncle were, lived in prior to him moving out. And she even went to the courthouse and got a copy of the deed. And she ended up persuading my uncle to sue my mom and to make her sell her home so that he could get his proceeds. Now, like I stated, we didn't know this woman. We didn't know anything about her. I had power of attorney, healthcare and finances of my uncle, so I was managing his money. And, and then all of a sudden, here this woman shows up. So we were a little kind of skeptical of what her intentions were in marrying my uncle. But anyway, they took my mom to court and began to, she was ordered to put her house on the market. And it was only by the grace of God that the housing market crashed during this time. And my mom's house didn't sell, because of all that was going on in the market. And my mom was able to stay in her home an additional 5 years before she passed. Now, after my mom passed, my uncle's wife contacted me, and she literally gave me 7 days to get everything out of my mom's house. And this was literally 14 days after my mom passed, but she gave me 7 days to get everything out. And because of the lawsuit and all that, they took my mom through, I just held my peace, and I just basically complied and got everything out. We packed everything out. Amy and I packed everything up, and we got everything out of the home. And even to this day, I don't know where half my mom's stuff went, just dealing with that whole ordeal. And they ended up renting the home out. And because I lived next door, I was privy to what was going on and all of that. But it was some time later that they went to refinance the home. And I get a call on my job from my uncle's wife stating that they needed me to come to the bank and sign some documents. And of course, my reaction was, I'm not signing anything. But I called my husband, and of course his response was, you're not signing anything, or you better not sign anything. And I wasn't going to, but it was a blessing in that my husband had prepaid legal on his job, and I believe it's called Legal Shield now. But anyway, I was able to call an attorney and explain what was going on. And the attorney instructed me not to sign anything, but also to contact the county and get a copy of the deed. So I did. I contacted the county and I got a copy of the deed, and I faxed it over to the attorney. And after I sent it to the attorney, he called me back, and he basically told me that I didn't have to sign anything because my mom and my uncle were tenants in common and not joint tenants, which means my mom's interest in half of the property went to me, her heir, and not to her brother. So here I was thinking that they were joint tenants, meaning that when she passed, my uncle automatically owned the home, and I got nothing, and thus me hurry up and getting everything out of the house. But I found out that they were tenants in common and that I owned half of the home. So let's talk about these two. First of all, I'm going to talk about the joint tenancy. Now, joint tenancy is co-ownership, where two or more individuals own equal shares of the property. So like 50-50. If it's three people, each person owns a 1/3 of the property. Now, if one owner dies, the surviving owner or owners inherit the deceased tenant's interest in the property. So if someone dies, that property automatically goes over to the owners, the other owners that were left, and they divide that evenly. Whatever the interest that they had, whatever percentage interest that they had, that goes to those two individuals, and it's divided evenly. And also this keeps the property from going into probate as well. On the other hand, if one of the joint tenants decide to sell their interest in the property, number one, they do not have to have permission from the other owners. And two, they can actually sell it, but it changes the ownership. It is no longer joint tenancy. It becomes tenancy in common. So as I stated, tenancy in common is what I found out that my mom and uncle had on the deed. And this is where two people own real property, and two or more. It doesn't have to be just two people. It could be two or more people own this property, and the ownership could be split evenly, or it could be percentaged off. So if it's two people, one person can own 25% and the other person can have an interest of 75% in the property. And if it's three, it could be 25, 25, and then 50 for the third person. So that's the difference between the joint, where the joint is split evenly. Tenants in common can individually sell their ownership in the property. So that's, similar to the tenancy, the joint tenancy. But where it differs between joint tenancy is that when one owner passes away, that property is not transferred to the other owners. The property is transferred to the heirs. That the individual that passed away, it's passed on to their heir, unless there's some type of legal document like a will or a trust that states that I want my property to go to, maybe the owners or whomever else. So because my mom and my uncle were tenants in common, when she passed, I inherited the ownership of the property. And so through the course of, what transpired and what have you, we were still trying to put the house up for sale and all of that. My uncle's wife passed. And then after she passed, the house was sold. And then my uncle and I were able to split the proceeds of the home evenly. And, the Lord just worked that whole situation out. And I believe it was because I held my peace and just because of the favor and grace of God. But I want to encourage you, if you would, please do the following. If you are a co-owner or you're looking or planning to co-own with someone else, make sure that you understand the difference. I would say, one, get a copy of your current deed to identify the type of ownership that you have. The second thing I would recommend is that you talk to a real estate attorney to understand the best type of ownership for your property. So depending on whether it's business property or, a home or whatever, make sure you understand the best type of ownership that you have when you're thinking about owning with someone else. The third recommendation is to talk to an estate attorney. If you plan to leave a property to a loved one, make sure you understand the best way to set that up, because there are, legal aspects, there are tax implications. There's so many different things that go along with that. So make sure that you talk to a estate attorney And then finally, also talk to a tax preparer who is familiar with property and estate taxes and the laws within the state that you reside in. So I know I kind of rushed through or covered quite a bit as it relates to joint tenancy and tenancy in common. I'm going to stop here, but I do encourage you to do your homework. Make sure that you understand the difference and the best for what you're going to do as it relates to your property. And join me next time where I will break down the other 3 types of ownership: sole ownership, tenancy by entirety, and also trust ownership. You don't want to miss that show. I'm Kimberly Ivory Graves. Thank you for joining the Living Peace and Order show. I love you with the love of Jesus. God bless you. Have a good night.